Good morning. I would like to thank you for the kind invitation. It's my pleasure and honor to participate in this very interesting conference. I have been impressed by the work that you have done in ASHRAE, and due to the fact that today I will represent somehow the policy pillar of the energy sector, I have to admit that it's very closely linked with the decision making. So, today, mainly I will speak as a member and vice president of the working team of the committee for supporting the Committee of Energy and Climate Plan in Greece. And I will try very briefly to present the role of buildings into the overall, let's say, framework, policy framework, which have been decided for our country. So, all the data, all the measures that I will present are included in the final National Energy Climate Plan, which was submitted in 2024. I have vast experience in the previous action plan for renewable energy for energy efficiency. I was a member also in the first National Energy Climate Plan that was submitted in 2019, and it was always a conclusion when we start the preparation and after the completion that the complete and, let's say, robust preparation of the plan should ensure the continuous cooperation of the policy pillar with the market pillar. And for this reason, it's very good. I'm very happy that we have this opportunity. I have to admit that this cooperation is not always effective. Yes, we recognize this necessity, but I think that this can be the first point in order to have a continued cooperation, because we need, let's say, this interaction with the market actors. And ideally, this interaction should be complemented with the participation of the society pillar, because end users, the citizens, the households, the end users, the enterprises are the final beneficiaries and implementers of the vast majority of these policies. So let's start in order to see the current, let's say, political decision in regards to the role of Greece in this attempt, which is tried at EU level for the decarbonizing energy sector. First conclusion is, yes, for the GHG emission reduction, we are, let's say, sufficiently ambitious as we intend to surpass the European target 50% reduction in 2030. We intend to have 58%, and we have committed in order to become carbon neutral up to 2050. The only deviation was that we decided 2040 not to comply with 90% of reduction, but we selected to reach 80% because we recognize the difficulties in order to decarbonize some specific sector, and I'm referring mainly on the transport sector, due to the fact that the expected, let's say, options seems not to be viable to us. So this was the first deviation, but we have to see how we will handle this decision in the upcoming revision of the National Energy Climate Plan 2027, taking into consideration the current decision at EU level for complying with 90% in the GHG emission. Second conclusion is, yes, we intend to exploit the advantage that we have in CRES. Yes, we have a very high CRES potential, and this is depicted in our target. In 2030, we will surpass the European one, 33%, and we will ensure the full penetration on CRES up to 2050. Annual electricity, as you can see, in 2030, we will reach 76%, and we have changed, let's say, the production model, and from importers we have already become exporters of renewable energy. Moreover, we continue the very satisfactory performance that we have in order to penetrate RES in heating and cooling. We are above the European average, let's say, share. And it's very important to see our, let's say, roadmap for RES in buildings as we think 2030, 72% of the overall utilized energy in buildings to come from RES. So, and as you can see, we will reach 100%. We have a deviation in transport, as you can see in 2030, as we had also in 2020. It's not possible to reach the target, or we believe that half of them can be achieved. And after 2030, we expect that the reduction of the cost of the green hydrogen and the production of synthetic fuels will provide us let's say, the necessary energy carriers in order to decarbonize the transport sector, and as you can see, we will intensify. Another deviation was in the final energy consumption target. As you can see, we decided in 2030 to have a slight deviation because the overall approach in this plan was, yes, to have a balance between a sufficient, let's say, ambition and to have a realistic plan, because we have to determine the actual, let's say, instrument in order to achieve the target, because we compiled this target, this plan in 2024, and we are speaking for targets 2030, so the period is too close, and we have a better idea about the available instruments. So the main priorities for the building sector is, yes, to accelerate the renovation of the building sector until 2030, to decarbonize, as we want for all the energy sector, to promote the efficient heating and cooling technologies, take into consideration the, let's say, the massive electrification, the sector coupling that is expected in the energy sector, to phase out fossil fuel boilers, and of course, it is national priority and is linked considerably with the indoor, let's say, environment and comfort levels, the alleviation of energy poverty. We have a persistent, high percentage of energy poor households, and it is a priority in order to combat this phenomenon. And as you can see, I have inserted also the projections for the annual renovations. For the period up to 2030, we have to have 68,000 renovations on an annual basis in order to fulfill this target. And let's say we will keep this pace up to 2040, and we increase up to 83,000 in the last decade until 2050. And this is a very quick overview of the utilized energy carrier. As you can see, there is the phase out of heating oil in residential building. There is the, let's say, increased reduction of the natural gas consumption for heating purposes, but a small share is retained in 2050. It's obvious that all this energy is substituted by heat pumps. For this reason, we have an increase, let's say, electricity consumption and the ambient heat as it's recorded in the building sector, while the shares of biomass and solar thermals somehow are retained, let's say, constant, but we have to have in mind, especially the biomass, which it's a decision to be utilized in rural areas. The quantity is same, but due to the fact that the energy efficiency, the performance ratio of the biomass boiler has been increased, so there is an increased number of households that use biomass. This is the analysis for the tertiary sector. The same conclusion can be derived. Here you can see the rapid penetration of heat pumps will increase, let's say, the electrification of this sector, and the same, let's say, conclusion can be derived for the fossil fuels. And this is an overview of the evolution of this CO2 emission. As you can see, building sector represents, let's say, 10% of the total emissions of the country, and yes, we have the same trend up to 2050. The sector will be fully decarbonized, and as you can see, after 2040, the main difficulty and the main challenge of our plans is how to decarbonize the transport sector. So, this is the forecast, this is estimation, this is the energy. And the question is, okay, what is the cost of all this investment? We try to estimate them, and as you can see, For the buildings of the tertiary and residential sector, we need up to, let's say, 10 billion euros from 2025 to 2030. I have excluded the investments for lighting systems and appliances, and we need 35 from 2031 to 2050. So the logical question is, do we have the funds for all of them? The obvious question is no, no country has. And according to our knowledge, the only available funds for renovating the buildings are the money which are foreseen in the social climate plan due to the ETS2 imposition. So let's say we are speaking for 2 billion euros from 2007 or 8, as it can be decided, up to 2030. Let's say that it's 1, 2, and the leverage is too small due to we are referring to energy poor households. So we can see that with the available funding for the period 2025 to 2030, we can cover less than half of the investments. So let's see what we have to do. There is a combination of measures. Okay, I want to speak more for the new measures. There is a combination of financial programs in order to provide subsidy for the different types of buildings, public, tertiary sector residential buildings. We intend to introduce fiscal and urban planning incentives, and moreover, there are also regulatory measures in order to promote nearly zero and zero emission buildings, and somehow to give incentives in order to renovate and to promote buildings above the minimum energy requirement. Emphasis must be given on the world-raising, let's say, measures. We have realized that especially the users are not aware about the actual cost, about what intervention should be done, about the actual indoor conditions that must be in the house. All these issues is something strange. They cannot understand, they cannot decide. So emphasis must be given, and for this reason, and the directives and the social climate plans foresees the establishment of one-stop shops in order to help them, in order to understand and to make better decisions and to facilitate the participation into the programs. But taking consideration that the available funding is not sufficient for all this investment, we have to think and we have to assess additional instruments. These are new instruments that must be implemented. They are not new. As you can see, a few of them have already been implemented in our, let's say, legal framework and policy framework. So the intention is to see how this can be improved. First measure is the energy efficiency obligation scheme. From 2017, the energy supplier have an obligation to achieve specific share of energy savings to the end users. We have the schemes, and now we have the discussion how this instrument can be improved in order to support all this energy transition. And we are speaking for energy supplier, and electricity, and for natural gas, and for petroleum products. There is a continuous reference in the National Energy Climate Plans about the aggregation schemes. It is crucial to aggregate projects in order to exploit the economies of scales and finally to have lower cost for the end user. We have the energy efficiency auctions, we have the clusters. There is in the legislation, nothing has been done, and I think that should be done. We have a new scheme, the build financing, where the part of the investment will be paid by the energy supplier, and the end user will be paid through the energy bills. This can be combined with the first measures. Then we have the tool of the energy audit, and we have to see how the recommendations actually can be implemented, because there are some cost-effective solutions and it's a starting point. In general, all this can be supported by the provision of energy services through the energy performance contract. We are speaking since 2011 about ESCOs, but I have to admit that nothing has been done. And we have to have in mind what's coming. For example, for the new directive for energy efficiency, we have to, let's say, apply the implementation of energy efficiency first principle. So when we have to take let's say, policies, strategic planning, and investment decision, we will have to assess if the energy efficiency option lead to higher societal benefits compared to the other options, because the outcome of the policies should be to maximize social welfare. Yes. Yes, there are specific obligations for public sector in order to reduce the consumption 1.9% on annual basis. The municipalities should compile local heating and cooling plans, and they should focus on the buildings. There is a provision in order to use energy performance contracting for large public buildings with an area higher than 750 square meters. We have a new provisions from the EPBD, the directive for the buildings. The most challenging issue, the minimum energy performance standards. We have to specify them in order for the buildings to have energy performance lower than the respective, which is resulted by the 16% of the buildings, non-residential, which have the lowest, let's say, performance. And the most challenging is that when a renovation will be undergone, or a trigger point on market will be caused, sale, rent, donation, or change of purpose, these buildings should be compliant with these minimum energy requirements. So it is, let's say, a regulatory measures that will trigger a lot of innovation, and we have a lot of provisions for increasing the penetration of solar energy in buildings, to establish schemes for renovation passport, to design and to construct the appropriate infrastructure for sustainable mobility in order to promote electromobility, and somehow to assess the smart readiness of buildings, the capability of the buildings to adapt, let's say, according to the decisions of the occupant. All these, as you can see, are related to the ASHRAE standards. So, and of course, I have to say that we have the imposition of ETS2, which will increase the energy prices of the fossil fuels in buildings and transport. So, and this should be addressed, and it's linked with the energy vulnerable households and micro enterprises. So, this is the overall policy framework. And last, I want to mention, let's say, according to my perspective, from my experience, the main challenges. Yes, we have specific programs, we have to continue them, but it is imperative to use with the most cost-effective way the available fund, because it's not sufficient. So we have to improve the effectiveness, both economic and procedural, of the current programs. Then we have to identify new financing instrument, but it is important to assess the capability of the end user to participate. So we have to be aware about this. Yes, we want to increase the leverage, so emphasis must be given on how we facilitate the actual financing, the provision of short loan, etc., etc. And this is crucial for energy poverty, because there is a significant high share of households and micro enterprises that do not have the financial capability for this. We have the problem of split incentives in the rented buildings. It is not easy to share the benefits and the cost between landlords and owners and the person who rent. And we have to continue to reinforce the current skills and knowledge. And I think it's very valuable that the job that we are doing in ASHRAE toward this direction. And of course, priority must be done the provision of high quality services, and we have to take into consideration what the actual beneficiary, the end user, believes about the provided service. It's crucial, it's fundamental, because the final beneficiary is the end user. And last word, because I have not included, in the NCP we have a special R&D for energy efficiency, because it is impressive the work that is done by the companies that are the sponsors. So we have to continue, we have to invest on new technologies in the energy efficiency sector, because I think at least we will manage to reinforce and strengthen our economy. Thank you very much again.